Got it. Test.
The best advice I can give you.
All right, I'd like to get the meeting started. Everyone could find a seat, please. Okay. Okay, I'm ready to get started now. If we could quiet down a little bit. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone that's here today and those that are viewing the session on YouTube for taking time out of your day to talk about or to listen to us present the budget. For those in the room, if you have a cell phone, please make sure it's silenced. We'll try to keep like most of our meetings, to an hour. There will be a Q&A at the end. So I just ask that you hold your questions till that time. And when you have a question, please go to the mic. Otherwise, people that are listening on YouTube cannot hear your question. Okay. So I'll be kicking it off, and then Jim will come in and talk more specifically about the budget. So this is just the agenda. I'll be doing the overview, and I'll introduce the committee members. And then at that point, Jim will take over and go through the details. And as I said, we'll end the session with a Q&A. So a quick overview of the process that we've followed up to this point. So it all starts with a guidance letter that we give to the GM and the Finance Committee. And that's taken place back in the May-June timeframe. And the process that we use is similar to any business that you may have worked with if you're ever part of the budgeting process. The guidance comes from above. You get down to the manager level. The managers and upper management work together, looking at what they've done previous years, this year, what we see coming forward. And the GM and the controller meet with all of the department managers, and then at the department level, that's where the budgeting is done, and then it all rolls up to the top. I'm not going to sit and bleed through all of our departments that we have here, but every department manager is involved in the process, along with Jim, Lance, and then there is some oversight too with the Finance Committee. And that's what takes place at that point in time to adjust it, and then come to the board with a recommended budget, which this year was done September 6th, where the Finance Committee comes into a board meeting and reviews the budget with us and answers any questions that we might have. And that brings us to where we are today, which is for us to communicate the budget at a higher level to the community. And then later on in the presentation, we'll talk about the next steps, which many of us are already familiar with because it's a process that we follow every year. Okay. The finance, so I'll also introduce the Finance Committee members. We have an incredible, talented group that works in the Finance Committee, and they work very, very hard. And the chair is Bob Coffin. Marty Oliver, Kara Blank, Keith Butler. If anyone's here, please stand up when I mention your names. Craig Harding, John Harris, Jim Hatch, Dave Edwards, Robert Grohl, and our liaison from the board and treasurer is Bob McGinnis, who attends every meeting as well and is very involved. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jim.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Thanks, Brian. We're going to start with the executive summary, just give the quick overview before we go into all the details. So we ran all this through the process that Brent mentioned, and it's going to come out to about a 4.22% increase overall. So that's $159 for an improved lot and $95 for an unimproved lot. This supports our consistent strategic and comprehensive master plan, our vision, our mission of promoting, providing, preserving, and sustaining the Conacy lifestyle. And we go into the details of how the breakdown of all these numbers, you'll see where it's going here in the next couple of slides. And it also provides adequate funding for our capital and infrastructure reserves so that we can do timely maintenance, repairs, and replacement of CFPOA assets, along with needed capital additions along the way. And realize that we're still at a point that we have, even though we had approval from the membership to borrow money for the building across the way here, we chose not to borrow the money. That wasn't a hard decision on our part, since when we were talking about that originally, we were looking at 2.5%, 3% type of loan money. Now we're at 8 or 9% for this type of commercial loan. So it just wasn't prudent for us to borrow that money, and we had enough cash to go ahead and complete the project without the borrowing. Some of the key points of this 2024 budget, last year and the year before, we had continued to try to draw down the amount that we subsidized through the amenity fund to operations. And that would number this in 2023 was $50,000. For anyone who remembers the presentations we had in the Activity and Wellness Center when we presented that, we had a cost of the overall construction cost, but we also committed that for the first few years that we would take $150,000 additional out of the amenity fund to help offset some of those additional operating costs with the new Activity and Wellness Center until we get a better idea of what the overall carrying costs are going to be going forward. So for at least for 2024 and probably at least 2025, that $150,000 additional money will be coming out of the amenity fund to offset the operations of A&W, which is what we committed to when we sold the project. The overall increase to payroll is 5%, but it's broken down a little differently. Some of you may remember 2 years ago, we committed as an organization to be a living wage employer. So that was in 2021. Every 2 years, they go through the same calculation to determine what the living wage is now. So this is done in 2023, about 2 months ago. The new number for Transylvania County is $16.40. So as you can see, that's a pretty significant increase, about 9%. So that impacts about a third of our overall employee base. Base of that is going to include mostly back of the kitchen people, dishwashers, some of the line cooks, some of the clubhouse ops people, and then some of the pretty much all of the security personnel except Mike West will be impacted by moving them from 15 to 1640. So that was the main significant impact of the payroll adjustment. The good news is our group health insurance actually went up 0%, which I've never seen that before. In the 30 years I've been doing this, I've never seen group health stay the same. So what that tells me is that, again, this is all personal information we don't know, but what that's telling me is that we must have a pretty healthy group of individuals that are working here, and the claim base is pretty low. So food and beverage operations have increased tremendously since the since the COVID restrictions have been removed. We are now 9 months into the year, and every month so far this year in food and beverage, we've significantly beat the revenue numbers for food and beverage. So that's a good thing. People are out and supporting the food and beverage operation. So when you look at the actual numbers, our improved lot number last year was 3,765. The increase of 159 brings it to 3,924. The unimproved lots pay 60% of the improved lot. So that comes out to last year 2,259, next year 2,354, which is an increase of the $95. And just so everyone knows, we have about 300 lots that are unimproved, that are privately owned. So what did the Finance Committee focus on during the process? Obviously, these are the same every year. We try to manage it in a fiscally prudent manner, including we do a lot of analysis of our reserve funds. to care for what we own and what we plan for the future. That task is becoming a little, I don't want to say easier, but a little more manageable. Those 2 or 3 years during this high inflationary period was pretty crazy. If you had told me that, in 2023 and 2022, you're going to be paying, $75,000 for a pickup truck, but that's what they were, Now, whether that's ever going to come down again, I have no idea, but it's nuts when the year, go back to 2020 and 2021, those numbers were like 50,000. So they were going up even higher than the inflationary number. We have a lot of heavy equipment. We also want to identify and manage our risk, which is obviously the reserves, insurance, and investment. We have a subcommittee of the finance committee that deals with the insurance aspect of the business, which includes obviously your liability and a lot of other liquor liability, officer liability. So there's a lot invested in time on the insurance side. Maintaining and enhancing property value. That's what it's all about, no matter what year we're talking about. And the other thing now that's, we're dealing with is there is probably a larger diversity of members in today's world than there was 5 or 6 years ago within the community as well. I think anyone who's been here a long time, and I know quite a few of you have, I'm sure if someone had told you even 5 years ago or 6 years ago that we'd have million to $1.5 million houses selling here, most people would think you're nuts. But now you can't find anything less than 700,000-800,000. A lot of them are fixer-uppers. It's sort of nuts, but they're still selling. And then we obviously, every year we go into our reserve and we reevaluate, estimating when items may or may not have to be replaced. So every item has a useful value, has a estimated value, and we go in there every year and update those numbers to make sure that we think we have the right year and the right amount of money in there in case that piece of equipment fails down the road. So just looking at it strictly bottom line total dollars, when the assessment would be billed out, that would generate $6,225,000. Our other income is $5 million, which is all your food and beverage, golf, rentals, all those different numbers go into that, boat slips. So our total revenue is $11,237,000. If you go back, not even 10 years ago, that number was half of that as far as total revenue. So, but our expenses are also going up, which is the unfortunate part. Our total expenses are $8,589,000 to operate everything that we own, and $2,648,000 to put into our reserves that get transferred at the time of the assessment to help fund the capital reserve fund. The expenditures from reserves is going to be $2,228,000 next year. That's a combination of our capital reserve type of equipment, and then also the remaining money that we'll spend on the A&W going into 2024, because that project will roll over into 2024. We'll have an additional $420,000 after those transactions, ending balance at the end of 2024. So here are some of the major items that we can discuss that impacted the overall assessment. The golf revenue increase and less our cost of goods sold is $250,000. So that helped offset or decrease the assessment by 4%, 4.3%. Remember that number, because I'm sure I'll get questions later on. The administration revenue increase, that is the boat slips, RV rentals, alumni memberships, and tenant fees, is $92,000 of additional monies based on the increases that we're suggesting in those areas. That's 1.47 that helped reduce the assessment. Food and beverage revenue lost. The sale is $207,000, 3.32. And then obviously you'll see that the employee expenses are the largest impact of the budget, 13%. The rest of these numbers are pretty minuscule, but we'll go over them anyway. The A&W, our best guess of determining utilities, electric, gas, the operating supplies, so forth, is $100,000 or 1.6% additional assessment. But realize that we also took $150,000 out of the amenity fund to support operations. So in reality, there's a $50,000 benefit there from the subsidy. The capital funding is a 3% increase. That's the standard increase we add to the capital fund every year. Infrastructure, same way, we add 3% to that each year. And in many funding operation, we talked about that 150,000, so that helped reduce the assessment by 2.4%. And then lot combination fees will be going into the operating budget, and that impacts it by reducing it by 0.38. Not a lot, but each one of the combination fee does help us overall. And then over some of the other departments, the minuscule departments, there's a $21,000 impact, or 0.36%. So if we look at a chart of percentage of your assessment, where is the assessment going? This is pretty much telling you where it's going. So your reserve funding is your largest percent of your assessment, 21%. Again, that's going to help offset all the replacement costs of all the capital equipment we own, which is a lot. Administrative costs is 18%. General maintenance, well, actually, I lied. General maintenance is your largest, 25%. That is basically your roads, all our people that do all the regular maintenance in the community, all your dam work. I mean, it's a big department. Clubhouse and A&W Center is 13%. But realize that Clubhouse absorbs everything else that is not there. So like your pool, your tennis courts, your pickleball courts, your outbuildings like the barn, Atagahi bathroom, restroom facility, the Wanteska multi-purpose room, all that is buried into the Clubhouse costs. So when you look at that, it's really not a big number comparatively to what it's maintaining. Golf is 3%, security is 9%, and then food and beverage is 10% of the overall assessment. Yeah. So let's break that into dollars for each one of those bits. So we have the pie chart percentage, but these are dollars. So general maintenance is, and I'm just going to go over the improved because that's what most of the people in this room are. So make it simple for them. So general maintenance is $970. Capital infrastructure is $821. Administration is $717. The clubhouse, wellness center, pool, all the other buildings I talked about is $522. Security is $368. Food and beverage is $402. And golf is $124 for a total of $3,924. What's interesting on this chart is when you look at employee versus the other operating expenses by year, it really hasn't changed a lot. So whether you go back to 2016, you go back further, this number's pretty been consistent. Even overall percent of labor compared to your revenue has stayed relatively the same. It's actually, you'll see that we are getting, to some extent, we're getting more bang for the buck from the employee perspective, because on our current budget of presenting it, we're going from 27 to 28. But if you go back to the other years, you'll see that they're all over 30% or over. So we are, even though we're growing, we are becoming more efficient from an employee perspective. So new activity and wellness center. As we promised, new A&W center will not increase the annual assessment. As I showed you a couple slides ago, we anticipate the first year cost to be $100,000, but we're still bringing in $150,000 from the amenity fund because that's what we presented in the A&W presentation. And again, that $100,000 is a guesstimate, obviously, because we haven't run the building yet for a year. So we just want to make sure that that $100,000 is incorrect, that we have a little cushion there to make sure that we have the proper funds to maintain it. The application fee for the A&W will be $75 if anyone wants to use the equipment. And that's part of the release of liability. You'll sign a liability form like you do now if you're part of the wellness program. And the additional cost, if you want to do all the classes, will be $150. So when you run those numbers, the total will be $225 annually for a single, and previously for the membership, including all the classes, was $300. We're saying here the first year will not be prorated. We're not sure exactly when we're going to open the building, but the $75 will be an annual cost no matter what. So we're not going to prorate that $75 going in. Whenever we open, we open. From a family membership perspective, it will be $300 extra, and that breaks down into where it would be currently is $525 for two of you, but for next year, it'd be $450. So as we presented and marketed in the A&W presentations, we let everyone know that the goal was to have it be less than what it would cost you now if you were a current wellness member. And just so everyone understands, all the classes that we have are all done by third-party independent contractors. So we pay them per class. And that's where that money goes to offset those costs of paying the instructors. We will be adding a full-time custodian person. We're not going to separate it out because that's just going to go into the clubhouse where all the rest of the custodial people are. But so the clubhouse budget went up for that position. And then we also added another part-time fitness person as well, because we want to try to have coverage in the building 7 days a week if we can. Right now, we only have it 5 days a week. And then obviously you have your normal utilities, which is electricity, water, phone, internet, etc. The golf membership rates. So we researched a lot of other clubs and we are increasing our membership rates, which still provide a value to our property owners. The golf course for any of the golf members or golfers that play the golf course has significantly improved over the last few years with the renovation, expansion of the driving range and the irrigation system. As a side note, we probably wouldn't have a golf course right now if we didn't spend that $1 million on the irrigation system a few years ago. I don't know if I ever would have said that we'd go almost, a month without having rain in Transylvania County. But we basically, in the old system, we had no coverage on most of the surrounds and none in the rough areas. All those would be dead by now. And we've invested between the irrigation and the driving range. We've invested about $1.3 million in improvements on the golf course. And we've also increased our overall operating costs on the golf maintenance side of it by over $100,000. So we feel that the product that we're giving right now is very justifiable of the increase. If anything, we probably should have been increasing this slower and not had it as painful. But the reality is you got to wait till you have a product before you can keep raising rates. So, and then we also made some big adjustments on the non-outside memberships as well, because that was not equitable either. So if you look at the golf rates, our current golf rates are 2,000 and 2,000 single and 3,000 family. We're recommending $3,500 for the family. And then we are also looking at justifying or implementing a per cart or per round fee for people that walk and take a pull cart, because whether they do that or not, so there's an impact on the golf course, whether they're walking or riding. And the way it's currently set up is the people that join and become members who take a golf cart every time are significantly subsidizing the overall revenue and expense side of the golf operation, because about 95% of a cart fee is profit. It costs about $3 or $4 to charge the cart, and we're charging $24. So every one of those carts that go out is $20. It's $40 profit. So it's not equitable that, you know, if someone who takes a cart plays 100 rounds and someone who walks pays 100 rounds, that you're paying the significantly more into the overall pot to pay for the expenses of maintaining the golf course. And just as a comparables, you'll see here Kenmure is $7,000, $9,000 for family. Etowah, which is a pure public golf course, actually their membership is a little different. You have to be a certain amount of distance away, that you live away from Etowah to even join. And they do that on purpose because they don't want you to be playing 200 rounds as a member, because that's where the killer is. Cummings Cove is $4,920, and then Sapphire National, which is up the road, is $2,500. You know, years ago we couldn't even make these comparisons because we didn't even have a product to compare. But when you look at what our product is now, competitively from a condition standpoint, we're as good or better than all these on here except maybe Kenmure, and that goes back and forth. We feel it's justified. And when you go to the non-property owned, and this never made sense to me for the last 4 or 5 years I've been here, but I think the logic was that, again, we had I hate to say it, but we had a poor product 5 or 6 years ago, and we were just dying to try to get memberships. And when you have a poor product, you can't ask for premium prices, right? So we're giving it away. It doesn't make sense that a single golf member is $2,400 and an unimproved lot owner in here is paying more than the outside golf member when they have the same rights to use things. Same as the family membership is $3,300, and the golf membership has full rights to use any of the amenities. They can use the golf course, they can use tennis courts, they can use pickleball courts, they can use the lakes, they can walk the trails. So it doesn't make sense that either, that they're paying less than what you're paying in your annual assessment. So we're making a significant jump on that as well. So we're going to $3,500 for the single golf membership and $5,000 for a family golf membership if you're a non-resident. Another note, because we've had a lot of discussion between the golf groups and myself. So I went back 6 years. If you look back at the 6-year history of what we charge from a membership perspective, the membership rate has went up 41% over the last 6 years. If you look at the outside rate of what we're charging the outside person to play golf, it's went up 100%. We're charging double what we were 6 years ago. And again, that's purely market and product driven, right? You know, you're offering a product that's good at a fair price and people are doing it. We spend $0 on marketing the outside play. It's all word of mouth and internet based. I don't know what that noise is. So how does this all look at when you look at the bottom line of golf? So you have the budget of that brings in the golf operation will bring in $1.5 million between the membership and outside play. The employee expenses are a little over $1 million. Other golf expenses are $610,000, which is your golf maintenance basically. Minus your net expenses of revenue is $198,000 is what we're projecting to subsidize the golf operation. And you'll see here going back to 2020, we were rounds. This year we're going to do 25,000. So, and if you go back to before 2020, you go back to 2017, 18, 19, those numbers were like 15,000 for golf rounds. Food and beverage. So 2023 will be the first year that we will have what I call a basic normal year again. In 2020 or 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, we had to go back in 2021, 2, and 3, and even for 2023, and go back and use 2018 as our best example of what we would normally do, because that was the last year that we had sort of a normal year in food and beverage, which is pre-COVID, obviously. So this year will be the first year that we had a full scale, everything open, all 3 venues open. And we're using obviously our 2023 number as our baseline for 2024. The net food and beverage expenses equals about 10% of the annual assessment. If you look at the McGladrey report, which is a report that does all HOA and country clubs down in Florida, at a state level, the average there is 17% in similar associations. And the clubhouse dining operation is open more now due to demand. So we are doing an opening as needed to deal with the people that want to come in. This is the same slide we do every year. It talks about what's the difference between a food and beverage operation, a clubhouse, and a restaurant. You know, a club, this is a typical in a club environment. You'll see that employee expenses are close to 100% of food and beverage revenue. Cost of sales average 42%. And in the case of the McGladrey study that they do in Florida, the average loss or subsidy in food and beverage is $920,000. We run ours at about $637,000. So it is an efficient operation. As an operation, we also pay the servers a higher hourly wage, because the volume of tables is less than other restaurants. So, you know, in a normal, typical restaurant like Square Root or any of them in town, I think Square Root's probably the best example because I think they're the highest volume restaurant in town. They'll flip tables 3, maybe 4 times in a night. We're lucky to flip tables twice, even in the grill, on a normal busy night in the grill. Because in a club environment, people will sit down and eat, but then they'll also sit down and talk and talk and talk. And that's what it's all about in your own club. So they're just not flipping tables the same way. We also talked about making sure that we can continue to be a certified living wage employer. So quite a bit in food and beverage that has an impact of raising quite a few people up to the $16.40 an hour hourly rate. And then most of our business is actually generated at lunch, and your lunch tabs are in general are lower than your dinner tabs, so your profit margins are smaller. So looking at the different budget numbers, you'll see that, consistently, we're pretty much in the same number. The dollars change, but the percent of your assessment really doesn't. We have, 9%, 8% was our budget for 2023. We're probably going to run at 10% because we are over budget year to date. So we'll probably end up at 10% in 2023 and we'll be the same in 2024. So the numbers change, but the percent of the assessment staying the same. Next big item is reserves. Let's just go through the basic logic of what all the reserves are, and everyone understands where they go. The amenity reserve is our biggest reserve fund. All of you know that have purchased in here that you paid an amount when you bought into the property, and we collect that from each home sale. Currently, that's $10,500. We budget this year. We budget about 80. We did budget 80 units to resell. We were behind, but now we're ahead of last year at the same point. How it happens? I don't even think there was 13 homes on the market. So it's telling me that homes are selling without even getting listed, that people are just connecting people to people. So, and that's not a bad thing. That's good for us. But what that money does, it goes into the amenity fund, and it can be used for pretty much anything that's a new construction or additions or modifications to any of our amenities. So any improvement to our amenities that we want to do or undertake, if there's enough funding in the amenity fund, we can use that fund to do that. Knowing that there is still a set amount that if it's more than 300 and I forget, it's a percentage of the assessment, it's roughly $400,000 that the board has authority to spend without a membership vote, but anything above that, the members would have to approve if it's coming out of the amenity fund. The real property reserve is a new fund, and it's actually a sub fund, if you want to call it, of the amenity fund. And that was created last 2022 and now into 2023. This is the second year I think we're collecting on it, right, Jim? If I remember right. And we're taking 20% of the amenity fees that come in each year, and we're segregating that into a separate account within the fund called the real property reserve. And the reason we are doing that is none of the building structures themselves within the community are included in the capital reserve, because the capital reserve fund takes any piece of capital and a capital asset that's $2,500 or more and has a useful life of less than 30 years. So none of the buildings are in there, but we all know that buildings are going to have to either be renovated, expanded, other things that may occur that are going to happen within that 30-year period. And we want to start putting some money away for those causes. So 20% of that amenity fund now that comes in goes into the real property reserve, which is a sub account, and sets aside money specifically to replace existing buildings. The capital reserve is relatively simple. That is any piece of equipment that we have, like I mentioned, that's has a value of $2,500 or more and a useful life of less than 30 years. That goes on a schedule, basically a spreadsheet, of when the useful life is, when we think we're going to have to replace it, what we think the value is today, and we add an inflationary number into it, and we calculate that so that we have enough funds in that account as the equipment starts deteriorating and depreciating, that we can purchase that equipment as needed. The infrastructure reserve is an account that we use for basically community maintenance. It's your roadway money for repairs and maintenance of the roadway system every year, your culvert system for your drainage, your dams and lakes, and your trees. And basically trees for us means cutting trees down that are dead, that are uncommon, or a safety issue that are on common property that we have to maintain during the year. And then the road trimming as well that we do every year. And then the last reserve we have is the emergency reserve. That is a fully funded reserve. It's based on a calculation of 2 months of expenses. And now that is fully funded, it just sits there and collects the interest from the money that we have in that account, and we put the interest in there every year. So it will continue to grow, but it's just the interest money that's growing it. So here's the balances, projected balances in all those accounts. The emergency reserve is $948,000. Based on our current return on investment of our investments that we're making, We're projecting we'll make $43,000 in interest or investment income on that account. So the balance at the end of the year will be $991,000. The capital account is $947,000 currently. It will go to 1.3 million when we collect the transfers. We'll expend $425,000 out of there, and we'll have a balance of $1,840,000 in that account at the end of the year. The infrastructure reserve, same way. We project to have $526,000 in that account at the beginning. So we'll have $249,000. The amenity fund, we currently have $3,175,000, or that's what we're projecting we'll have at the end of the year. We're projecting $815,000 in amenity fees of resales. Now we're projecting at about $1.2 million of the A&W cost will roll into next year. So we'll reduce that, and you'll have about $2.75 million in the amenity fund at the end of 2024. And then the real property fund that we just talked about a few minutes ago, we'll now have $451,000 at the end of the year that will be available to use if we have to do any type of major maintenance or repairs or replacement of any of the buildings. So our total reserves at the end of 2024 will be $6,281,000. And this is just a breakdown of that infrastructure, $567,000, $433,000 of roads and $134,000 of culverts. We try to do anywhere from 3 to 5 miles of road every year. And the reason we say 3 to 5 is, we're forecasting the expense of 433. That's almost strictly driven by oil prices. So if oil prices spike going into 2024, we're not going to be able to do 5 miles. We might only be able to do 3 miles, or it might go the other way. If that ever happened, it would go the other way. So let's look at what we are looking to spend out of these funds in that last chart I showed you where all the money is coming out. So the A&W will be $3.9 million, give or take. And that will be this year, and $1.3 million like we talked about in 2024 will be going to A&W. The parks, we're looking at adding an additional shade area somewhere around the playground. So we have some areas of the playground that will be covered. The clubhouse retrofit, which is basically what's going to happen with the current fitness center downstairs, which has not been decided yet. The facilities planning is still working on that, but we have $150,000 set aside for that retro. The walking track, it has $30,000 in there for the fitness equipment stations that are there. Those have all been, they're all outdated now and falling apart. So we're going to replace those. That's $30,000. One thing the facility planning committee recommended and worked through their process was trying to build a pavilion down by the tennis courts so that we can have an outdoor space for concerts and so forth. That's $100,000. The biggest reason that's an expense, it's not that big of an item or structure, but the biggest cost there is running the electric and power to it. So we're going to have to upgrade the panel at the in the little bathroom there by the tennis courts. But we'd like to have another outdoor venue for those type of events. In the capital reserve, we have $125,000 in the capital reserve to replace the playground equipment at the Atagahi Park. As anyone knows, that park, except for the new multi-use structure, all the rest of those pieces of equipment are all pretty much 30 to 50 years old, or the original piece of equipment. So they need to be updated. And then the rest is equipment for the golf course is $61,000 for greens mower, $8,000 to $6,000 for 2 vent track mowers. Those are the mowers that we use to cut the rough and also uses blowers to blow the leaves both on the golf course and along the community roadways. $20,000 for Kubota Truckster, which is a community maintenance item as well. That's what we use when we're doing the roadway systems for flagging and so forth. And then a turbine blower, which is a unit I talked about that we put on the front of the vent track mowers that acts as a blower to blow leaves and debris off the roads and golf course. So what happens now? October 18th at 9:30 a.m., the board will have a Zoom meeting to recommend that the 2024 budget be sent or not sent for a member vote. So we'll be sending out a pretty short meeting, but the board will just be in the conference room for that, and then we'll Zoom it for anyone who wants to view it. On October 23rd, the budget vote ballots will be sent out to all voting members via email with a link that includes the budget overview, a frequently asked question sheet, a YouTube link to this presentation, a section for the member name and number, obviously the vote question for or against, and then any voting member without an email will be mailed a voting package via United States Postal Service. And we also have a handful of people that do not, even though they have an email, do not like electronic voting, and they want to use a paper ballot, and they can request one. That's not a problem. They can either pick one up or we'll mail them one as well. On November 27th, all the budget votes are due. That's the deadline. December 1st, the election committee will meet to certify the vote, and we'll send out the results via email later that day. And then December 4th, the special board meeting will be to announce the budget, even though we're announcing it beforehand. But basically, the board always meets after the vote just to certify the vote as well and verify the results. So in conclusion, once again, we can say that the CFPOA is in great financial condition with no debt. We have a very well disciplined expense management program, very strong reserves. We continue to try to improve our financial controls and information technology. The infrastructure we have in here from an IT perspective on our 4,000 acres is enormous. So Robert and Zach in the back are in charge of trying to maintain that as much as possible, but I don't even know how many Wi-Fi spots we have, but we have a crap load of Wi-Fi spots. And as anyone knows who owns a house and has a Wi-Fi router, they don't always stay on, especially when you get electricity going around at night. So again, there is no perfect budget, but we think this represents the best efforts that we have based on all the knowledge and experience we have. And we hope you'll support it. If you have any questions along the way, please email them to cfpoa@conestecfalls.com by October 12th, which is 8 days from now, right? No, 10 days from now. And we thank you for your attendance and interest today. And with that, we will open it for questions and comments.
Good afternoon, Jim,
Chip.
board members. My name's Chip Webb. I live on 1181 Sequilly Drive. I've got a couple of comments. About 4 years ago, I asked a question about the pricing difference or revenue difference between the improved and unimproved lots.
Right.
I did not really get an official response for the difference, but I did have a board member come up to me after the meeting and said basically that difference was because they wanted the unimproved lots or those owners to build in Conisty. So they were giving them some incentive to come out here and build. Well, now I'm asking the same question again.
Yep.
And I'm having issues with the rationale for why there is a cost difference between the two.
Yep.
Since we've had new construction over the past several years, a lot of homes have come into place, and the lot owners basically are unimproved lots have gone down in numbers. Now, Jim, you mentioned 300 for some of my numbers in this discussion. I was using 255, so but I'll give you some cost differences there.
Yep. And I'll break that. Difference about how many are privately owned and how many are paying. That's the difference too. But anyway, and that's part of that. And when I answer your question, I
agree. Let's say 255 may be close to the paying amount.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's close. But
which is fine. Then that'll roll in.
It's close enough for government.
Some of my numbers here. That's correct. Again, I'm struggling with the rationale for the cost difference between the two. Now, the POA does not provide any service to an improved lot with a house
Sure.
that it does not also provide to that unimproved lot
Yep.
as well. I mean, for example, we mow the street. So the unimproved lot, he gets his street mowed, the improved lot gets his street mowed. So there's no service distance. Also, the unimproved lot owner has the same community privileges as the improved lot owner.
Yep.
Cost difference over the years has historically been in the 50 to 60% range.
Mhm.
But I think it's time that we need to start closing that gap. As the board knows, we have numerous lots that are owned by Transylvania County residents who live just outside our gates. These lots were purchased for the primary reason of giving them access to our community. Having that access, and they enjoy all the amenities that everybody else does. They get to come in, fish, play golf, what else we do?
Eat.
Pickleball,
Eat.
tennis,
Yeah, eat.
use the clubhouse, exactly. And
Hiking trails.
they're paying 40% less than what I'm paying, and I'm using these same amenities. So I don't think this is fair. I really don't. I'd like to ask the finance committee and the board to seriously consider closing this gap between the two entities, between the improved and unimproved lot property owners. If the gap is closed over a 3-year period, POA would see $133,000 in additional revenue per year.
I mean, that's
If-
the
if
same
you-
number we came up with this morning, Brent.
If you want to do it one shot, that's over $400,000.
Yep.
$400,000 a year that you're basically, in my opinion, just leaving on the table. Considering what that lot owner can do, and I'm paying more than what he's paying. This is very easy. It's a very easy increase. It's
Just really, and not that it wouldn't matter, but it would take a membership vote to do it. But I'll answer the question. I'll go into some of the details to discuss it.
well, okay, that's fine. If it's easy pickings, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know a lot about this because it has been discussed a lot and are you done with this question? I want to answer this one first, or do you want to go through your other comments? Whichever way you want to do it. I just
No,
don't want to forget a question.
Jim, I think I've made my points. I appreciate
Okay.
it. I want to thank the board, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer some questions from my perspective, but I'll hear your
Yeah.
responses on some of my comments.
So, and I hope that, I know Jim and Marty are here, they'll correct, because they're on the build out task force. And this is a big discussion item on the build out task force. So I think the number, give or take, is 360, I'm going to get rough numbers, of total privately owned lots. And there's about 100, I think it's 105, right, or 110, that basically are paying zero. They haven't paid anything for years. And all those lots are liened. We have a lien on those. So we will collect some money at some point or collect a lot in lieu of. So that gets back to your number where you're pretty close, 250, 260 that are paying. The build out task force, and part of their recommendations to the board, also made the same recommendation that we should be looking at changing our governing documents, because that's where it's listed. So it'd have to take a vote of the member.
Correct.
To give us the ability over either right away or over time to say, hey, let's increase it. Let's change the bylaws to say it's going to be anywhere from 70. It gives you some ability to either do what you're saying,
Close the
incrementally close the gap, but get only one vote to do it. Because you don't want to do it, go out to vote for 70%, then 80%, then 90%. So that has been discussed. The board has received that recommendation and are mulling it over. I believe at the finance committee level, we discussed it as well. The concern is, not the concern, but the question is, you potentially might lose some paying people, right? So if you have 100 people that decide not to pay, is the offset going to level itself out so that that increase will have offset the revenue associated with people that may walk away? And the answer to that is probably yes. But will it also potentially, and from a build out task force perspective, will it also potentially increase the amount of construction activity because you'll have a bunch of people try to sell their lots to someone who hopefully will build on it. So that's another concern. But so the discussion is happening. It wasn't agreed upon at this point for 2024 to implement that recommendation, but it is discussed for sure.
The community vote would have to be on the bylaws, is that
It's actually in the declaration where the declaration of covenants,
some sort of legal document?
it specifically says 60%
Okay,
of an improved lot.
okay.
But again, I doubt that that would be an issue or a problem to get approved, right? If 90% of your people are improved lots, I'm sure they'd support that.
Probably get a good support.
Yeah,
for
I think it
that,
would get good
for
support,
that,
yeah.
when it comes.
Yeah, turn your mic on, Bob. Just hit the button where the red, see the red light?
Oh, I can talk loud. This issue actually came up a couple of years ago where there was a member with the same thoughts. And we actually took a log, sort of drew a circle around this community, about 50 miles. And I think there was only a distinct minority.
30, there's 32, I think the number was. I'm sorry, there's 32, I think the number was, that lived within a 50-mile radius.
Yeah, so our thinking was, we're not really being abused by a whole lot of people. There are people who will pay that to get in here. But how many people are going to come here on a daily basis when they live 60, 70, 80 miles? So I get it, but I don't think it's as big an issue of all these people every day coming on.
No, but I think Chip's point is, the reality is they have the same rights as anyone else to
And
use,
Bob,
to use what's within a community.
That's correct. And Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you have some lot owners that are owned by multiple families.
Correct.
And
Yep.
there's nothing stopping
Nope.
5, 6 families
Nope.
own one lot to come in.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of one lot particular that has 10 names on the deed, and technically they all have access, yeah.
I'd like to see the board and finance committee take a serious look at this.
And that's why we also looked at the outside, because it also didn't make sense for the outside membership scenario either. Why are we selling access to golf members to have access to everything else here and charging less than we're charging an improved lot? That never made sense to me. But, all right, but,
Thank you for
yeah,
your
thanks,
consideration.
Chip.
We'll look at it again.
We'll look, yeah, I think we have to look at it all the time. And obviously, like I said, the Build Out Task Force had that as a recommendation to the board as well. So it definitely wouldn't hurt to go out potentially and at least get a vote to say, hey, let's give ourselves the ability at some point to say, hey, let's go ahead and get a vote to say we want to have the ability to go from 60% to 100%. And then we have the flexibility at any given time to do that over time. I know in my community, I own 2 lots and I got to pay full price. They don't give me any breaks.
I'm Nancy Patrick Sharsik. I've been here 31 years.
Yay.
Yay.
And I was on the board at the time that this was put into place.
Okay, good.
But my only comment is based on the comment you made, I think at the last meeting, that we are capping the number of homes.
Right.
And my recommendation would be, at the time you do that, would be the time to say, we are going to have X number of homes and they are all going to pay.
They all got to pay equally. Yeah.
Yes,
Yep,
Yeah.
that would make sense too.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, because I don't know, you obviously know the history. So at some point, I'm assuming that they were paying 100%.
When I came, it was like a good old boys club.
You were probably the first woman board president, right?
I
Sure.
wasn't board, but I was one of the first women on the board.
Yeah, good for
Yeah,
you.
but I
Good.
had a mouth
That's great.
and experience because real estate is my background.
Okay, so I'm assuming that because it's in there now at 60%, it was added after the fact. So, but again, I'm guessing 30 years ago, the assessment was probably $1,000 or something. And
It was $750.
Right, so
there
no
were
one-
750 homes and the assessments were less than $1,000 because what they were trying to do at that time, there were a lot of people, there were 3,030 lots.
Yeah,
And people bought the lot and never paid anything.
yeah,
So there was a goal to get the money in. Well, what they did was they put that in the operating fund and there wasn't any reserves.
Yeah,
And when you ask them, what are you going to do if a building, something happens? Well, we'll charge the people who live here at the
right.
time.
So the differential was so small in those days that people didn't care, right? So when
Oh,
it started going up, people were complaining, the lot owners were complaining that they were paying too much, right? So somehow the 60% got
I'm
in there.
going back a lot of years.
Yeah, but that, you know, the real question is from a economic standpoint is trying to do some type of estimation to say if you go to 100%, how many are going to walk away and stop paying? And will that be offset by the additional 40% you're getting from the other undeveloped lot people that continue to pay? I mean, that's the real question.
Eliminate the lots that are probably truly unbuildable. I think your comment was. there's
Yeah.
problems on it.
Yeah, and that was, and her question was the unbuildable, if you eliminate the unbuildable lot. So we didn't do a overall assessment of every private lot, but we feel pretty comfortable that we know our lots and we say, okay, we own 500 and something lots, and we know realistically out of those 500 and some lots that CFPOA owns, probably only 100 to 110 of them are realistically feasible to build on. Any lot can be built on, but if someone to spend $300,000 on the infrastructure like they did up on top of Conacy Trail Road, that new house that's going up, yeah, that might make sense. You're trying to sell a $1.5 million home, but on a lot that has no views, no anything, no one's going to do that. There's no road. So we feel comfortable that that same calculation is probably pretty accurate, but we gave benefit of the doubt and said, let's give them a little higher percentage. But we probably think there's only, out of the 250 or 300 private lots, there's probably only 70 or 80 of those that are buildable. So you got a bunch of people paying on unimproved lots that lots aren't buildable. So as soon as you start increasing that number from 60, 70, 80, 90%, those people are finally going to figure it out and say, why am I paying out on a lot that I can't build and I can't get out of it because I can't sell it because no one's going to buy it because it's too hard to build on. So they're going to walk away. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yeah, I had one question. I'm a person who uses the pool all the time, every day. I don't see anything. Debbie Eads.
Yeah.
Is there any plan or, I mean, what's going to happen with that?
Yeah, so we are still actively, actually, myself and Lance met with the pool contractor, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we're still actively working with them on design and costs and continue to cost estimate the project. And depending on where we end up, I think what we committed as a board and community was once we get through 2023 and we see where our amenity fund reserve and enough money in there to fund that project, that we would re-present that project to the community. And right now, the appearance is that we would, assuming between now and next 3 months, nothing crazy happens. So most likely we'll present a project, sometime early next year.
Okay, so you start with like an architect or getting.
Well, we have all the renderings and all that done. All the design work's done.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And the plan is still the same. If we present would be, a pool that would be twice the size of the current pool and a small lap pool that would be covered for year-round use. That's 20 feet by 65 feet long.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Okay. Yep. And lucky you this year, there's been nice weather to keep the pool open long this year.
Yes, we're still swimming.
That's good. That makes me feel better to pay that heat bill. No, that's great.
Marcy Barbe. I'm not the golfer in the family, but I'm the one that pays the bills.
Yeah.
And I know this is, in the whole scheme of things, it's a small issue, but I'm curious, how many of our members actually walk as opposed to take the cart? What percentage?
Percentage is, you're gonna go off the top of my head, but roughly, I would say 5% of the rounds are probably walking around. It's a low number comparative to the overall rounds.
Right.
It's like
So-
I'm just going off the top of my mind, like last month, I think the walking rounds like 280, let's say. And we
Right.
did about a little over 25 or 2,600 rounds. So it's a low number.
Okay, so given that,
Yeah.
my husband likes to walk for the exercise,
Right.
and between the golf, increase, the membership increase
Right.
and then that additional expense. And am I correct in reading that it was, you could either pay $5 each time or $250 for the year? Okay,
Correct.
so if it's
It'd
$250
be
a year,
$750.
yeah,
Yeah.
then the total thing would be $2,750,
Right.
which is a 23% increase from
Yep.
2 years ago.
Yep.
And I don't think my social security has increased 23%.
Hey, wait, you got a 9%,
So-
you got a 9% increase last year.
I got what?
You got a 9% increase last year on your social security.
Yeah. But what did we get the year before?
That's true. It never catches up, does it?
So, given that it's such a low percentage, does it really make that much difference in terms
From a
of?
dollar perspective, it does not. We talked about this at multiple levels at the finance committee and even at the board level. It's not a big dollar number, but to us, it's an equity and just saying, hey, look, realize that everybody that is using the golf course has some skin in that game of paying the maintenance costs of maintaining it. And right now, the members that take a golf cart is significantly subsidizing and paying for that maintenance because that's where all our profit's coming from.
Yeah, I get that. It just somehow
I know.
seems to like penalize the people that want to
The-
walk and get the exercise.
Yeah, the reality is if you go back about 4 years ago or 5 years ago at an overall level of assessment, I think it was 4 years ago, we had a pretty drastic increase on the overall assessment. I think it was like 8, almost 9%.
Yeah,
And the reality of that, the reason that occurred was because for the previous years before that, we weren't going up accordingly and we had to catch up all at once. And this, to me, it's sort of the same thing in golf. We should have been going up incrementally more on golf over the last 4 or 5 years, and we didn't.
right. Do the outside people who come here to play, are they required to take a card?
Yes, they have to take a card.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
All right, thanks.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions? 1, 2, going once, going twice. Oh, question.
My name's Lori Borrego. I've been coming up here for 25 years. I've owned for 5.
Oh, wow.
Question, is there going to be a monthly membership?
And I don't have that number in front of me, but there will be a monthly membership available for unlimited classes if you want to do the classes. Yes.
Okay. Also for the golf, is the single membership going to go up to play 1 round?
No, yeah, for the property owners that are not a member, that number is going up. I think it's $10.
Okay, will you be providing that information
Mm.
for us to review?
Yeah, so actually what's going to happen, Kurt, our golf professor, he put a sheet together, like a 1-pager that has all the golf information. And we'll include that in what we send out with the budget.
Then I
Right.
won't ask all
And-
my other questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
What is it? I don't know what is that?
It's the paint.
Oh, the paint, he's using spray gun. All right, well, with that, we appreciate everyone coming out today, a beautiful day. I would have rather been outside today than listen to this, but it's important that everyone gets the information and knows the facts as best we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you.